Good evening. It's now 20:45 and nobody's enrolled onto this session, and there's nobody notified me that they weren't arriving. So what I will do, I'll give an overview of the unit in this session. It will be recorded, and I will put it onto Moodle for you. Okay, now looking at this unit, I did Learning Objective 1 a fortnight ago, and that was put on for you to be able to access. I'm going to look at the other learning objectives now, mainly because they're all the same. Subject changes, but they are particularly all the same. To do that, I'll go into the Moodle now, and for those of you that haven't attacked Moodle yet, this is the procedure. So you go into the icon you've got for Moodle, you log on at the top. In my case, I do it twice because it rejects my first one for some reason. You go into the course, Level 5 Diploma in Education and Training, and that takes you down to the actual unit, the actual units themselves. This is the full qualification. There is some reading for you to do in the first part of it, and it's worth reading through some of these to find out what it's about and so forth, the actual units themselves. Now, each of them unit has an individual section, unit 1, 2 and 3, etc. We move on. We, of course, are doing unit 3 at present, which is a prerequisite for the other units in terms of delivery. There are many things in this unit that you will complete and will be able to refer to in further units as we progress through the course. So looking at this unit, I've looked at 2 or 3 amplifications. I'm going to look at Unit 3 Amplification 2. Now it looks at the learning objective. It looks at the initial assessment criteria for 1.1, which is analysed theories of principles and models of learning. It then goes on to 1.2, explain ways in which those theories can be adapted or used or applied in your environment. Again, models of learning preference it goes into at 1.3, and an explanation of how identifying and taking account of learners' individual preferences, that's things like VARC, affect how you actually deliver. It gives you ideas in the second column. Now, Learning Objective 2, it looks at understanding the application of theories and principles and models of communication in education and training. So it looks at communication theories, language links to stages of development, and it gives the theorists involved the role of language on cognitive development by Kotsky. He comes up quite a lot. He's involved in quite a few of the areas of discussion here. Transactional analysis styles, ego states, cross transactions, interactionist approaches, impact on non-verbal or body language, or elaborate or restricted language course. Those are worth looking at because probably 70% of what you do is done by non-verbal language. Other forms of communication, paper-based, online, measure readability, chart rooms, synchronous and asynchronous distance learning communication, and email communications. Now, one of the things that we need to establish on this course is communication between me and yourselves. It's important if we booked a session and you've received the invite to the session, if you're not going to be able to make the session, I need to be notified in advance. And that's quite simply done by email or text or on the WhatsApp link for our course. So again, it looks at theorists involved in there and how they can be adapted in the second part, 2.2, how they can be adapted or applied to teaching, learning and assessment. It may be once you've read through the material of some of these that you'll think to yourself, well, actually, that's how I deliver, that's how I prepare with one particular theorist, and you can explain that. It may be parts of other ones as well that you also incorporate into the way you teach and the way you prepare to teach, and of course the resources that you use. Using video to review sessions, use of voice, physical space, cross-transactions, a whole host of those things may be used within the organisation that you're with. They may have their own system. Quite a few colleges have an intranet, and information and communication is done via that, in fact. 3.1 is understand the application of theories, principles and models of assessment in education and training. So it's the same process all the way through each of the learning objectives in this unit, apart from 5, which I'll cover in a minute. So it looks at assessment theories. When assessment is done, initial assessment to assimilate what's needed. Diagnostic assessment to break some of that initial assessment down into exactly what is needed. This is done mainly on language courses where students may have reached a certain level in language, for instance, in reading, but their writing and pronunciation may be behind that. And diagnostic assessments aim to find out that, and then may make it easier then for the teacher to put together a package that will improve that. Measures of skills, the aptitude of knowledge, credible and compatible with learning programs. So the assessments have got to be set so that they match what's required from the training program or learning program. It promotes learning. There are different sessions. There's, of course, the training cycle is that you do review and then alter what needs to be altered or put right what needs to be altered. And it's a continuing process. Formative assessment comes after the program started. And that will be, in our case, in the way we work, what I generally ask you to do is do the first couple of learning objectives, send them through to me, I'll have a look at them and give you feedback on them as fast as possible. That will then say, yeah, that's great, carry on like that, or it will be, perhaps you need to look at this. It's a pure directional assessment, formative assessment. And then, of course, the summative assessment is on completion of learning when the whole area is then looked at again. Feedback, of course, comes at the end of that as well. And the second part is exactly that, the other one, explaining ways in which those theories and principles or models of assessment can be used in assessing and learning. And there will be types of assessment that will match pretty much what you do. Most schools and colleges use a range of assessment models, but particular courses lend themselves to particular types of assessment. For instance, in very practical tasks, it's sometimes much easier to actually observe that, the assessor to observe the whole task in terms of covering a wider area of not just a particular criteria, but it may be that within that observation there will be several units that are covered and probably quite a few of the learning objectives within those areas that will be covered at the same time on one piece of work. An example I can give you on that is I used to assess engineering in the workplace, and it may be that I'm looking at a particular piece of mechanical engineering that the learner or the apprentice in this case is going to put together. But I will also watch him prepare his equipment. He'll cover health and safety rules, and he'll also clear up when he's finished. So those are different parts of or parts of different units, which will be covered during that observation. Others are much easier to look at. A piece of work that's been produced, a piece of written work in our case, which can be looked at to see that it covers what's being asked for. 4.1 is analysing theories and models of curriculum and curriculum development, how a curriculum is developed and why, what it tends to achieve and how it's set out. This looks at a whole host of different people on here. You've got Maslow, of course, behaviourists, Skinner and Watson are cognitivists, and you've got a whole different types of development theorists that will tell you their system is best, but there isn't a best system. They need to be looked at individually and see where those fit in to the type of system that you do in your place of work. Because on the whole, this course is only partially academic. This unit is pretty well academic, but the rest of the units, you can gather evidence from your workplace on the things that you do. And the suggested evidence that I put on the Moodle for you to read through will direct you or will point you in the direction of what sort of evidence you can produce where you work. So again, it looks at examples of schemes of work and discussion on the influences on curriculum of the different theorists. There are further more models down here. It mentions unit-based, which we're doing, and holistic. Again, the type of assessment I described in the last part of The Apprentice, that was a holistic assessment because it looked at collecting the evidence from the work or what fell out of the work that was being done, rather than looking at a specific piece of criteria. And then explain, of course, ways in which this can be applied to developing the curricula in your own area of specialism. Some of you will have a head of unit, or they will have a line manager they can ask for information on this, and it will give some, how curricula are developed in your own area of specialism. Now, 5.1 is slightly different in that it looks at analysing theories and models of reflection and evaluation. And this is aimed at yourself. But you look at, as I mentioned before, part of called learning cycles, learning styles and so forth. But it also looks at how you reflect on the work that you do. Every teacher, at the end of the day, will look at, nearly every time anyway, when you've delivered a course, you will look back on it and say, I think that went really well. The learners were involved. I got asked plenty of questions. It went through. The whole thing gelled together. Other times you'll think, well, that wasn't really very good. Such and such a thing didn't go down very well. Perhaps I could have done this. Perhaps I should have shown a video on that point. There are other things that you can look at afterwards and think, that could have been better. So this is what this is about. Most of them look at the same thing, but very slightly differences. It looks at reflection in action while you're working, reflection on action, like I've just mentioned, after you've finished. Looking at plan, do, review. In other words, you plan to do something, you do it, and then you review it, and look at what's happened or what falls out of that. So, again, there are a number of theorists in this area. We'll look at, if you look at them individually, they've all got something to say on the subject, but when you look at it in total, when you've read or researched a few of these, they're all saying a very similar thing, just going at it in a different way. So 5.2 then, it breaks away from what he said before, because it brings this then very individually. And it's explained ways in which theories and models of reflection and evaluation can be applied to reviewing your own practice. So it's how you review. It may be that your school has a review system, and there may be a written one that you can fill in on your thoughts of how something went. Others will be personal review of what you've done, and you'll make a record of that. So it's reflecting on your own practice. Personal experiences, a SWOT analysis of yourself. That's very easy to do. Session evaluation, the whole course evaluation, how you actually deal with problems that crop up, coping strategies for that, identifying development opportunities in action planning and networking with others. Again, alternative approaches to reflection, for example, recording through audio or video, which is what we do, and then that then is looked at some point. A group of teaching sessions will be sent to me, and I will look through those and do a report on each one, and that will go back to the teacher or the assessor for their views on that. So that is an overview of the whole unit, really, because it's fairly straightforward to deliver, because it's the same thing over and over again, repeated. It looks at a number of theories on a subject, and then it asks you to actually do some research on those and write about what you think about it. And then the second part is how you would apply any of those to the way you develop what it is, curriculum or assessment planning, or whatever it is within your establishment. And as I've said before, somebody within your establishment can assist you on that. If there are specific documents you have to complete, or methods of reflection, if you like, that they insist on, then look at doing that. And of course, that will save you writing reams and reams, because you'll then be able to produce documents to show that you've filled in this document on a particular subject, and that's your evidence of it. Now, what I would suggest at this point, and this goes for all the units that we'll work through at a later point, when you are supplying or copying any documentation from your establishment, make sure that there are no individual names on it. Dates, material, the rest of it, it doesn't matter. It can have the school's logo on. That's irrelevant. Just make sure that if you've got learners' names on there, you remove them and put them on. Use whatever criteria you want. You know, it can be learner A and learner B, or 1 and 2, however you want to actually put it down on there. Yeah. But the documents must be actual documents, and they must be complete and, where possible, signed and dated. Otherwise, they're not valid as evidence, because anybody can just fill a form out online and say, I've done that. So from there, what I want you to do is look at Learning Objective 1, and I'm going to just put that down a minute. Unit 3, let's go back from there. Yeah. And I'm going to put the suggested evidence unit up. That's a Word document, and you'll find this on Moodle for you to look at separately. But each of the ones I put together on an assignment front sheet, and at the side of there, I put evidence to achievement of the LO, and this is suggested or directed evidence of what you could look at. Yeah. Read and respond. Theories are suggested in the amplification can be read and taken from Chapter 2 of the e-book Teaching and Learning in Higher Education, Enhancing Academic Practice. Make your analysis from the models, audio, visual, etc. from the amplification. Check your responses at Unit 1. I'll remove that. This is if you once you've completed number 1, there is some cross-referencing here from this 1.4 on here to Unit 1. Analyse theory and principles of model of communication, check the application for analysis ideas, and explain from your analysis some of the ways they can be applied in your particular instance. Yeah. Again, analyse theory and model of assessment, read and respond. Here you have to focus particularly on the assessment theories and the models of assessment, and explain how at least one model of assessment applies to you and how you work with your learners. 4, read and respond again on the theories and model of curriculum development. Most of the context of this level 4 is taken from Chapter 4 of the e-book Teaching and Learning in Higher Education. However, your explanation should cover your situation, yeah? Because it says on it in a lot of places on here, developing curricula in your own area of specialism. By specialism, it means any way in which you work. Your specialism can be working with 6 to 7-year-olds. It can be 12 to 13-year-olds. It could be adults. That's what it means really on there, the way you work with them, your learners. There's a handout on the reflective teacher. Again, it's on the Moodle. There are some, there's a recording for learning objective 1. There's on there, there's some information per unit 2, for LO2. Again, there's a big one for LO1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. One specific one for LO4. And linking theories to practice. On there, again, explain how you apply some of the theories in Task 5.1. It doesn't need to be so many. If you could specialise on, if there's one of the theories that you specifically work to in your reflection process, then explain and show where how that operates within your establishment. Again, it's explain how this is done in terms of you as a teacher. And again, this, yes, I do need to change that. Okay. All this is available on the Moodle platform, and once you've completed something, you just pull the documents out, have a look at them, read through them before you start. I always say that, what the specification is, if you read through the specification. Looks at how it's written out, is pretty much how it's on that form, and you will see from there are no changes in any way, form to the document I've just shown you with regard to the actual NCFE standards written down. We can go back from that. If there are any further questions you've got on this, of course, as I said before, on the communication bit, talk to me. I am available to you more or less 24/7. If you've got an issue, contact me with it. I can't do anything about it unless you speak to me. And that, of course, includes contacting me if you can't make a session. Because then, if all of you are not making a session, I'll just go straight into a recording and I'll put that on for you on Moodle, but I need to know. Okay, well, thank you all for listening. I'm going to close that now. And again, contact me if you've got any further information that you need.